Well, glad to have you join me again today. I would like to talk about the church and what's happening and has happened there through eons, in fact. The church has failed people. Many people have been pushed to the side and are considered outsiders, not able to come into the church and become part of the family. Now, even Jesus had that problem. In Matthew 23:27, it says that you are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. He was talking to the teachers of the Torah. That is God's law, the Old Testament. In particular, he was sharing about the Ten Commandments and what the prophet had shared with the Israelite people. Now, in Matthew 15:8, it says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce. For they teach man-made ideas as commandments of God." This was Jesus. He also talked to a teacher of the law that came to him during the night and said, "I know you are a rabbi and the Messiah, because no one else could do miracles like you do." Now, after a little talking, he said to this teacher of Israel, "Yet you do not understand these earthly things. How do you know earthly spiritual things? How would you know real spirituality? How would you know heavenly things?" This was John 3:10. And then one came to him and said, "Which is the greatest command?" See, they had hundreds of commands, over 700 of them, because they divided everything in the Ten Commandments and everything that the prophets had spoke into different laws. Now, you couldn't walk only so many miles on the day you honored God, called the Sabbath day, or you were breaking the Sabbath. You couldn't even take your animals. You couldn't even give them drink and food, because you would be dishonoring the Sabbath. Well, that's crazy. That had nothing to do with the Sabbath. Was the day that we honor and worship God. It was made for God, not man. It was made to honor him. So, this one person came to Jesus and said, "What is the greatest commandment?" And he said, "The most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul. And the second is like this, to love your neighbor as yourself. These two commandments fulfill all the laws of the prophets and the Ten Commandments." We don't need any more. We don't need any more. So, when people begin to say, "Well, because of the color of your skin, because of your lifestyle, because of your ancestry, you cannot be in the church because God will not accept you." No, those are laws within what is real. If you were pushed out of a church, and I was pushed out of three churches would not accept me because of my lifestyle. Now, that's happened not just recently, but it's happened all through the church history, all through the Israelite history even. Don't allow some people and their misconceived notions of what's religious to stop you from knowing the Lord, from serving the Lord. There are churches out there that accept the Lord. You want to know what you need to do to find Christ. That's Romans 10, 9, and 10. That if we confess out of our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe it in our hearts and that God raised him from the dead, meaning he paid the penalty by dying. That's the penalty for doing wrong. He raised him from the dead. You will be saved. There's no more. There's nothing else. That's it. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. And it is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. He, that is Jesus, defined what your neighbor was. And this was an interesting story, and we'll share that real quickly. Jesus said in John that there was a man, an Israelite man, because he was talking to Israelite people, that got beat up by some bandits and left alongside of the road. Then a half-breed, that is a half-Jewish, half-pagan culture. In fact, the pagan culture he came from were enemies to the Jewish people, and it had one time pulled them right out of Israel and took over, except these. And these were the people that were called Samaritans. They were not good. They were the enemy. They were half-breeds. They weren't allowed in the temple. They weren't allowed to come to Jerusalem. They weren't allowed in any temple. They were outcast. But this man was called the Good Samaritan because he did the work of God. He came by this man who was lying on the road half dead. He bandaged him. He picked him up. He took him to a motel room and he nursed him that night. And the next day he went down to the office and said, "Hey, if this guy has to stay longer, if he needs more help, more medicine, you pay for it and I'll pay you back. When I come back through, I'm just on a journey and I'll be back." This was the man who showed compassion and love. He knew God in his heart. He was the neighbor. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor is whoever is in need. Again, the only thing that disqualifies you from being a child of God, a believer, yes, he calls you a child of God when you come to him. And the only thing that can disqualify you is not accepting God and not accepting his son having paid the penalty. Do, if you haven't yet accepted Christ. It's a whole new world. Do it now. Just get down on your knees. Ask God to forgive you for the bad things you've done. You know what they were. Ask him to come into your life. Accept the penalty. No, the payment for the penalty that Jesus did for us. Thank you for this evening.